Hi, I'm Fraser Douglas, the avid tent camper again. Today is Friday, March the 18th, 2016, and Ava and I have just driven down to the far southwestern corner of Georgia, about 330 miles south of our home. We've set up our camp in Seminole State Park on Lake Seminole. We've just set up our camp and eaten a little bit of lunch, and so now I thought I would talk a little bit about guy lines. You can see that we've got 5 guy lines on each side of our tent, plus 8 guy lines to hold up our kitchen canopy. On our tent, we have 3 guy lines that are attached to poles high, and then we've got 2 pull-out tabs to provide extra ventilation. On our tarp, we've got 4 poles, and each pole has 2 guy lines that come down to the ground to hold it upright. Let me begin by describing the traditional procedure for deploying guy lines. From the early 1900s, guy lines have been used to hold tents and kitchen shelters upright, provide proper ventilation, and prevent them from being blown away. T.H. Holden's 1908 camping book, for example, showed dozens of photos and drawings of tents with guy lines and devoted a full chapter to pegs and slides. Traditionally, guy lines were made from 5 to 10 foot lengths of rope about 3/8 inch in diameter. One end of the rope was attached to a tent or tarp guy out point with a permanent knot. The other end of the rope was pulled out and away from the tent and attached to a wooden peg or stake with an adjustable loop. The adjustable loop was needed to maintain proper tension on the guy line. Initially, the adjustable loop was made with homemade wooden slides similar to the one shown in this photo. These 2 photos show how a slide was attached to the rope to make the loop. A few years later, camping outfitter companies began making small slides from steel and later from hard plastic. These slides were attached to one end of a cord that was tied to a tent pull-out loop. Sometime in the mid-1960s, campers began using taut line hitches rather than slides to make these adjustable loops. In the early 2000s, magazine articles began suggesting that campers could use truckers' hitches to make these loops. Regardless of how the adjustable loop was made, old camping books have always shown it tied around the stake, and recent camping books have just copied this traditional procedure. I used this traditional procedure for 45 years until I eventually realized that it is backwards. Specifically, I realized that the adjustable loop should be tied around the tent loop or tarp guy out point rather than around the stake. Now, let me describe my improved procedure. Behind many guy out loops is a Velcro hook and loop tab. Be sure that tab is securely attached to its adjacent pole. Use 10-inch nail stakes for most structural guy lines and 6-inch nailed stakes for tent stakeout loops and rainfly pull-out lines. I prefer these stakes because they can be driven into rocky soil and crushed stone tent pads. They hold firm even in wet soil, and they can be quickly removed when the time comes to pack up. The best cord for guy lines is 3mm utility cord found in most camping outfitting stores. 450 paracord and 3/8-inch hardware store cord are about the same size. This size requires minimal packing space, but is strong enough to support tents in moderate wind. We tie the guy line to the tent with a taut line hitch, and at the other end of the guy line I have just a simple overhand loop, and what I'll do is wrap this loop twice, one time and then a second time around the tent peg, and that provides a very secure attachment. For kitchen tarp guy lines, we make a leverage loop like the one shown in this photo for each guy line. Then we tie the guy line to one of the loops with a taut line hitch and loop the other loop over the tarp support pole. When the adjustable loop of the guy line is tied to the tent, it can be easily adjusted even when the stake is buried deep into the ground. One last note, be sure and organize your campsite so that tent and kitchen shelter guy lines do not block normal traffic flow routes. When guy lines block normal traffic flow routes, they can easily trip you. Well, I hope this video gives you some good ideas about how to tie your tent and tarp guy lines for future camping trips. And I also hope that you'll share this video on social media with your friends. For more information about camping, tent, and tarp guy lines, read my recent book titled Basic Tent Camping, and visit my website, www.basictentcamping.com. Remember, take more trips, travel further, visit more attractions, and save money. Go tent camping.